Discourse. I am Tyler Frater alongside Richard A. the Cruz, who is off today, and Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
Good evening.
It is Monday, May 5th, 2025. Go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/thegamingdiscourse, patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. You can support us for $247, $10. Get your name in the video credits, early access to our videos, access to our Discord server, and more. We have new things coming out for our patrons. I wanted to change how the weekly updates worked. So I'm trying to do deeper, sort of more bloggy type weekly updates where I talk about some stuff. So I talked about blueprints last week and my thoughts on the Xbox price increase, which we'll talk about more here in a few minutes. But yeah, so if you are interested in that, go check us out. Every now and then there'll be a free public post so that everybody can see. But yeah, that's going to be something that is reserved for our patrons, and I have some stuff that I plan on talking about this week too, so check us out, patreon.com, and let us know what you think if you're a subscriber as well, because I'm trying to understand, get some feedback here, get some thoughts on things. Here we go. Okay, so we have a ton to talk about this week. I've been playing a lot of different games that I'm really excited about. One game that I think is one of the best games this year that isn't getting anywhere near the praise or the hype that it should be getting. But Connor, why don't you start off with what you've been playing recently?
I beat Blueprints.
Oh, wow, you finished it. Okay.
Yes. I got a really lucky run and made it to room 46.
Awesome. Okay. And you got one of the levers and opened the door and everything?
Yes, I did.
We won't spoil anything, but was the ending satisfying? Was it interesting?
It made more questions.
Okay.
I don't think this is too big of a spoiler, but after you make it to room 46, does the cutscene, goes to credits, and then it goes the next day, and you start back at the entrance.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it goes into like a forever mode where it stops counting days.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense because I imagine there's all kinds of puzzles and stuff that you can figure out and whatnot. So.
Well, when you get back into the game on the next day, on one of the side tables is a list of challenges.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Alrighty, and that's the stuff you're supposed to complete or whatever.
Yeah, there's like solve specific puzzles at specific areas. What else? Beat the game in under an hour, stuff like that.
So how did your thoughts on Blueprints evolved at all? Have you enjoyed? Did you end up enjoying the game more? What do you think?
I think one of the biggest hindrances of it is the RNG aspect of it. You can prep everything perfectly for the day and then not make it past the third row just because you're only drawing rooms that curl in on themselves, or you aren't getting keys, or you aren't getting ivory dice to get your rerolls in. And the RNG can be fairly predictable. Certain rooms only spawn in certain areas. Certain rooms spawn more frequently the deeper you go in. But I don't think it's... I don't know. I feel it can be a bit punishing, the RNG aspect of it.
Okay, interesting. I would say I don't know if it. Yeah, and I don't know if it's purposefully punishing or not, but I'll say that's just what. And I've said this over and over again. That's kind of what put me off about the game, because so many of the puzzles, so many of the mysteries are just you're kicking a can down the road because you drafted the laboratory, and now it's time to end the day. So it's just like there's no. I'm being slightly whatever. I can't say that word.
Facetious.
Thank you. Obviously, you don't have to pick that one, but if you pick rooms that are dead ends, then the day just ends. So it's like a lot of those mysteries, I feel like there is an artificial barrier to completing them because so much is up to chance. And I think, if you look at other roguelikes, how they compensate for that is by making the player stronger or giving them more versatile, giving them more tools to solve certain situations, so that in the early game, in situations that are game overs or restarts or whatever, you now have the tools to surpass that because you're more powerful. Therefore, you're able to get to those late game stages more often, right? So, and that's very common across the entire genre. So I don't know what Blueprints gains by not giving you more permanent upgrades. I know there's like different things you can do that are permanent. You can get an allowance, right? Which is a permanent, you can like start the day with so much gold that can help you out. So there are various permanent things, but they're not given to you. They're not linearly delivered. Instead, with like the allowance, you kind of have to find the things that give you an allowance, right?
Yeah.
It's not explicitly told to you. So, it does require exploration. It does require experimentation, but I just wish I don't see what, in my playthrough of Blueprints, I got to like 50 something runs, and after 50 something days, and after that, I was kind of just done with it. There were 10 of those days are probably useless. So I'm thinking, why did I need these days besides just wasting time? It wasn't all that entertaining. It wasn't all that fun. It was just putting off the mysteries and the puzzles for another day, or I would discover a puzzle or something. And because I know that the RNG is there, then I know my excitement for discovering a new puzzle is now diluted because I know I'll solve it whenever the game allows me to solve it, as opposed to, oh, this is something I can focus on, right? It's just, oh, what's this room with a giant spinning bridge in it? I guess I'll solve it whenever the game decides I get the right combinations of rooms, as opposed to me having the skills or compensating by like collecting the right equipment or something. And I'm just not a fan of that. I don't know. I don't think having a notebook filled with notes, that's not my idea of a good time. And I don't know, when I played, I'm glad people like Blueprints. I'm glad it sold well. I hope it sells 1 billion copies, and I hope the person that developed the game becomes the richest person on the planet. But it's just, it has confused me with one of the greatest games of all time, because when I think of my favorite puzzle games from the last few years, I think of games like Talos Principle 2, which is awe-inspiringly like insightful and has actual characters that develop, that you learn from, has this incredibly complex storyline with all this layers to the writing, and on top of all that has really difficult puzzles and just this deep mystery about it. And so I don't know, when I think about like my favorite puzzle games from recent years, my mind goes to something like Talos Principle. And I don't know, I just feel like there are certain prominent people in the press, Jason Schreier, who I love his work. Jason Schreier is the best person on the planet. There, morally, ethically, whatever, it's there. But that I just think love Blueprints, and that's fine. But I think the hype for it has, I think, partially been media driven, which is interesting because I don't think that kind of thing happens a whole lot. I think when games get really big, it's because a lot of people are playing it, Baldur's Gate 3, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not always something where like certain members of the press are really excited about something. I mean, even something like Astrobot, which was clearly, I think people were excited about on like a press level. I think that definitely had a groundswell of people, had like a grassroots level that were excited for it as well. So yeah. Anything else on Blueprints? I haven't played it since
There was
for like 2 weeks now.
There was probably 10 days in a row where I was just running into the house to try and solve a puzzle.
Yeah.
And I wasn't I wasn't like actively trying to progress through the house. I was just trying to figure out this one puzzle. And I don't know if you've ever started on it, but it involves the pictures that are scattered around the house.
I know of it, and I've kind of vaguely understood, like, it clearly has to do with a letter that is missing or something,
Yeah.
and then there's a grid, and I'm sure I could piece that all together, but again, it's just one of those things where I start to piece it together, and then, oh, red rooms, and I just lose interest, because it's just, it's an artificial barrier, it feels like, to just solving this freaking puzzle. It gets to the point where solving the puzzle, I'm not solving it because I'm excited to solve it. I'm solving it because I feel obligated to grind through so many room combinations until I stumble across the solution.
Yeah.
Which may be too harsh. I don't know. It's not, now I'm getting angry. I'm just in my
There's
mind. I'm imagining a Blueprints run ending, and it's just making me frustrated.
there's a permanent room that you can get put in the house.
I know the one. Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it was on a vowel of this word I was working on that had like there's uh 3 vowels that can make 3 different words in this exact configuration. I just stared at it for about 10 minutes, angry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I figured it out at the end.
Okay, gotcha.
I ended up
Well,
just, context clues with the rest of the puzzle.
yeah. Blueprints has also made me think about how many games are. I don't know. This is a much bigger conversation. So it's just Blueprints has inspired this thought in my head of how many games are so dependent on notes for their story. Where it's like they don't really know how to deliver it. So you're just going to get a sea
Physical letters.
of letters and notes and text in order to deliver some kind of explanation as to who you are and what you're doing in the place that you are, right? And I think that's I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying that's a failure of Blueprints, but I do think it is a crutch that a lot of games lean on because it's just an easy way to sort of deliver a narrative and a storyline
Yeah.
that players can come across. So you don't have to think about character development or anything like that. You can just sort of put these letters around and it's like, okay, that's set, that's there. But lore and like what happened previously, those things are not story. They are not narrative.
The first time I found one of the red envelopes, which have the bulk of the story in them, I was elbows deep in trying to figure out like how certain things connected. So I didn't even really read it. I was just skimming through it, looking for anything that hinted to anything else in the house.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you'd like to say about Blueprints?
It is interesting. I really enjoyed the end cinematic. It was interesting for the rest of the story that is unfurling as you find more information about the house. But that's all I'll say.
Okay, so I've been playing a lot of different games, but I think the one I'd like to talk about is Skin Deep by Blendo Games. It is a immersive sim set on spaceships, relatively small but dense spaceships. You play as an insurance commando who is sent in to save cats because these spaceships have been hijacked by pirates. So the idea is you get the keys, the cats are put in these little fire hydrant like boxes. The pirates captured them and put them in these boxes. So you steal keys from the pirates, you free the cats, and then you eliminate the pirates. And there's being set on a space station, there's all sorts of different ways you can manipulate the environment or mess with the pirates. It's very, very dense, very systems heavy. There are pipes that run throughout the ships that if you shoot, gas will pour out and there will be like a little bubble of gas. And if you find a lighter, you can flip the lighter and throw the lighter into the gas bubble and or the gas cloud, and it'll detonate. And if there's a pirate in there, you can blow them up. If you stun a pirate somehow, like if you throw a heavy object at their head, you can then pounce on top of the pirate and steer them into like if there's a sink or a console in a wall somewhere, and you can sort of bash their head into that, and that's the one way you can kill them. The other day I wanted to lure a pirate upstairs because I was hiding. There's like a room that was 2 levels, and I was up second level. They were the first level. So I put down a radio and I turned the radio on, and I put a banana peel in front of the radio. And so the pirate reacted to the radio. What's that? You know? And so the pirate walked up the stairs and was walking toward the radio, slipped on the banana peel, and then I pounced on the pirate and bashed his head into the wall a couple times or whatever and knocked him out. So that was awesome. But it's super stylistic. I wanted to look up the artist. If you remember Star Wars movie posters, or movie posters from like Indiana Jones from the 80s and 70s and 80s, right? If you look at some of the art for the game, it kind of reminds me of that. It's very retrofuturistic, not super retrofuturistic, but I think retrofuturistic enough. 1970s, like I think it's got some like disco themes, very brightly colored. It's very funny. When you kill a pirate, they don't die. They have an insurance. They have their own insurance plan where their head pops off and it goes into a little floating orb, and they have stations on the ship that like rebuild their bodies, molecular, like they have like molecular recompilers or whatever. So their head floats back to this little thing, and then their body regenerates, right? It goes very slowly, but it's funny because as the head is floating back, the pirates will be angry with you. So they'll be like, once I get my body back, I'm going to kick your butt, funny stuff like that. But anyway, if you take the head and then you go to an airlock and you go outside the ship, you can like throw the head out into space, and that's one way you can kill them, get rid of them like for good and stuff like that, which is funny. The company you work for is Meow Corp. It's a company ran by cats. There is no explanation as to why in this world cats are like sentient and have businesses, but they do. And they are the people that you are rescuing. They're the characters you are rescuing. And all the meows are performed by humans. So if you get up to a cat that's been captured, but you don't have a key, the voice line will just be like, meow, let me out of here, meow meow. Like it's just a very no, they're not attempting to emulate the sound of a cat. They're just saying meow, which is really funny. I think I told you before the show that it has the guards have like a Metal Gear Solid 2 type AI system, where if there's 4 guards on a ship and you take one out and then you get spotted for a second, they may call to, everybody check in or whatever. And if you don't check in, then alarms are raised. But if you knock out a guard and take their radio or whatever, and then one of those, one of the guards calls for everybody to check in, it's really funny because you'll hear on the radio, Alpha reporting in, Bravo reporting in. And the main character, her name is Nina. When it gets to Nina will make her voice all deep and she'll be like, everything's good here, boss. Really funny on the radio and stuff. So it's very slapstick, very silly. It has a really fun personality about it. It really just exudes like once you save the cats, Nina gets you get new training material through emails. They're compliance emails, where you get certifications for like guns and stuff like that. But you also chat with the cats. Like one cat is like, there's a cat, all the cats are designed differently, and one cat is like a skateboarder cat, and the cat floats Nina this idea where they're like, I think we should do a cross-species skateboarding, and we make the humans ride a giant skateboard because us cats ride skateboards that are giant relative to us. And you can like respond, like these just ridiculous conversations you can have with all these cats. One cat, I think, is talking about starting up some kind of business for like coffee or something, and you can respond to that cat. So it's very funny and ridiculous, and like everyone's super laid back and silly. I really, really enjoy it. All the systems interacting, it really does make you want to be creative with how you solve problems, with how you go about taking out guards or whatever, one of my favorite things to do is, so everything in the game, at least thus far, so like the ships have vents that you can crawl through. They obviously have windows like on the bridge and whatnot. But the pirates will lock these things down. So in order to like crawl through the vents, you have to find the breaker box for the vents and flip the breaker, and that unlocks the vents so you can crawl through them. When the windows are locked down, it's the same thing. You find the vent. Sometimes the pirates will have it locked where you have to find a code and punch in the code, and then you can unlock the vent or unlock the windows. But the windows, there's just like a gate on either side of the window, and so the gates just sort of go away, and then what's left is the glass. But one of my favorite things is if there's a bunch of pirates on the bridge, I find the gate, the code to the window, I punch it in, flip the breaker, the protectors, the guards on the window are gone, and then I go outside of the ship, and using whatever object I have, because you can grab, there's tons of stuff you can grab, there's books lying around, all kinds of stuff around spaceships. You pick it up, you can just bash the window until it breaks, and the pirates will be sucked down into space, and you'll be fine, because Nina, for whatever reason, can breathe in space. I don't think it hasn't been explained to me why yet, but she can breathe in space.
It's because she's an insurance salesman.
Yeah. She's not human.
Which is part of the job.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, I really can't wait to play it more. It's got, the levels have they've got perfect length to them, perfect size. The design is really nice, like in how it gives you opportunities to do things, and allows you to really like when you finally do rescue the cats, pirates will send reinforcements, and they'll land through an airlock, so you can kind of prepare for that. If you have objects that you want to like throw at the pirates, you can pile stuff up in front of the airlock or whatever and get ready, and then when they board the ship, they send gas in first. That's like, it's like poisonous gas, and then they come in later and you can fight them or whatever. You can also just steal the key to the escape pod and then just take off with the escape pod, which is really funny. So yeah, there's it's like, I don't even think it's $20. It may be like $20-$25 game, but the density that's there, which is how you solve puzzles or how you solve these different systems, is so much fun. There was a ship I went on. It was the library ship. It was a ship that's just a giant library. And the library has these checkpoints where if you take a book through it, it electrocutes you. So it's a lethal library for some reason. And so what you can do is if you throw a book through those gates, it'll shock whatever's in the middle. So like when I was fighting a couple of the pirates, I would wait until the pirates got close to those gateways, and I would toss a book at the gateway, and it would fly through the gateway and activate, and it would shock the pirate. And they have a corny little, cartoony shock animation that's really cute and really fun. So yeah, like I cannot wait to play this more. And I think it's one of the best games this year. And I can't stress how much personality, and I think creating comedy is difficult because it's so easy to do like Marvel writing, or it's so easy to do just ridiculous slapstick, which sometimes works. It's not that there's no place for that, but I think it's more difficult to find, like, to do subtly comedic things, or to find a sort of comedic personality that's not as generic. And I think Skin Deep does that really well. Like, it doesn't ever say why the cats that you rescue decide to ask Nina all these ridiculous questions. You kind of just go with the flow. You're like, oh, this cat wants to know if we should do cross-species skateboarding. Sure, why the hell not? It's just like, there's just no reason to it. So it's just very fun, very silly. I can't wait to play it more, and hopefully the game continues to deliver these systems in a deep way where it keeps making me think about how I want to change things, or how I want things to what tools I want to use to get past certain obstacles or whatever, because it is so silly and so much fun. And it's very a lot of the things are very obvious, right? Like they don't make sense totally within real world logic. Like if there's a sink with a soap dispenser and you press the soap dispenser, there's a cloud of gas that comes out, and that gas is flammable. Why they have flammable soap is never explained. But so it's like that's a way. You know, if you do that, you throw a lighter at it and that'll explode. So that's a way to take out pirates. Yeah, you can throw things at their head. You can you can send them out into space. There are boxes of pepper lying around, and if you throw it at their feet hard enough, it'll make them sneeze, and then you can jump on them. So that's like one way you can stun them. So it's very silly, very fun. I can't wait to play more. And yeah, it's not very expensive. So it's one of those games where it just feels like it's like, man, it feels like I don't talk about price in games because I think that's just too tricky, and I don't know. It's not something we'll talk about it, I guess, in a second. But it's one of those things where it's like, man, this feels like I'm stealing this game for getting it for this much. I don't know how long the game is, so maybe it's not super long. But even then, playing through some of those missions, it's just so much fun to take my time and think of creative ways to solve different obstacles and whatnot, and just have fun and wreak havoc. And of course, all the destruction you wreak across the ship stays there. So it's like the destructible environments are funny because once you're done beating up a pirate, it's like the sink that you hit is running, so like the water is going and there's like a blood stain on the wall, and it's all very cartoony and funny. But okay, I've repeated myself enough. Anything you would like to say before we go to the news?
The developer is Blindo Games and is currently $17.99 on Steam. It is on sale.
Yeah, that feels like a steal. $17.99 for Skin Deep. Feels like an absolute steal. There's good music, the voice acting, the acting is phenomenal. Even though it's funny and slapsticky, like it's hard to act comedically, you know? I feel like anybody can do Ryan Reynolds. Well, anyway, you know, but it's just like, it's hard to, I don't know, to do something that isn't Marvel funny. Maybe I'm just being a douchebag now. I don't know. But I feel like that just the personality that the game exudes is hard to pull off, like that specific type of sense of humor. But anyway, okay, we'll hit the ad and we'll get to news.
All right.
Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server. Xbox has raised its price on consoles. The Series S is now $380. The Series X now $600. The Series X 2 terabyte is now $730. The company also announced that which I'm not exactly sure what that means, of their first party games will be at the $80 range. And then elsewhere, controllers, $65, wireless controller up to $70. So I don't think that Microsoft said explicitly that some of these hardware increases were connected to tariffs, but it's hard to imagine that this late in a console's life cycle, they would just tack on an extra $100 for no reason. So I imagine it has something to do with the tariffs. However, the first party games going up to $80, that has, I would expect, less to do with tariffs, more to do with wanting to just charge more for some games, and we'll see. So I don't know what we talked about like Mario Kart being $80, and if I don't know, I think multiple things can be true at once. Yes, I think a lot of games are probably charging less than they should be charging, but I imagine a lot of those are smaller games. Yes, there are economic realities about games where games are getting more expensive to make because the tech is getting more expensive and teams have more and more people attached, etc., etc. At the same time, I feel like it's difficult to believe that Madden needs to be $80 or $70 to make a profit. I think that's nonsense.
Corporate greed.
I don't think Call of Duty needs to, and I don't know, the point I'm trying to make here is that I just, two things can be true at once, right? And that's, are games getting more expensive to make? That's a yes. Are there some games out there that probably should charge more? That's also a yes. At the same time, I don't think that some of these $80 premium games are actually need to be that way in order to make a sustainable business. And also, I would also like to talk about why can't we figure out ways to bring these budgets down? Like, what are the reasons for these cost increases, for these budget increases, and of those reasons, which ones actually lead to people buying the game, right? Is it all of them? Is it some of them? I think that's a part of the conversation that is kind of just getting glossed over. So yeah, I just think there's a more complex conversation there about the $70 now /$80 price increase for games. One of the things that I'm thinking about is like, what upcoming Xbox game would you pay $80 plus tax for, right? So it's like the Fable's coming up, right? Would you pay $80 plus tax for whatever the next Fable game is going to be?
Upcoming Xbox games, none.
Or if the Halo, because it seems like the Halo remake is a real thing. So if they're remaking Combat Evolved and that comes out and that's $80, I don't know. Is that a seller? Is that something, if it has multiplayer attached?
There is one game that I would be willing to pay $80 for Microsoft, and that is the Halo RPG.
The Halo RPG. Yeah, but
have where if you have coin.
But in all seriousness, like, I don't know. It's like at some point, there's got to be a threshold where people are just put off by these premium games costing this much, and I don't think every game can cost that much, right? Like maybe GTA 6 can get away with it, but can the next Gears of War get away with it? I don't know. I think that's hard to answer. And also, you now, especially with the AA space is not as vibrant, I guess, as it was 10, 15 years ago. But it does seem like we're getting a solid trickle of mid-tier games. Claire Obscure Expedition 33 is the famous one right now. There's Pacific Drive. I don't know if you would count Blueprints as more of an indie game, but it's within the similar price range, right? So that price range where it's not like under $25, but it's not more than 50, right? Maybe you want to put Space Marine 2 in there because that was 60, so it's like a normal priced game, but it's inflated for what is current premium prices. So it's like we've gotten a lot of those games that have had a lot of praise and popularity over the past few years. So if some of Xbox's first party titles are going to be $80, can they compete with smaller games that are charging less and are also just as like critically acclaimed and whatnot? I think that's a real conversation to be had. And again, paired with when I think about upcoming Xbox games, it's like, I don't know if anybody has a game. Nobody has a game that is as anticipated as GTA 6, right? Yeah. So it's like, after that, what are the next big anticipated games? And it's just like, I don't know, Ghost of Tsushima 2. I don't know. Like, I don't know if anyone has games that are going to be like gigantic for the companies, but for the games industry itself, I don't think. Like I think the next Elder Scrolls game could be like that, but that's nowhere on the horizon.
That's coming out, 2067.
Yeah. So there's a lot there that I think is interesting. I'm curious if some of those price increases will bring back like the physical store, right? Because how many people will, if let's say the Halo remake comes out and it is $80, how many people will say, you know what, I'll wait 6 months and I'll buy it $5-10 off from GameStop, right? I'll get it for a little bit of a discount that way. Like, how Will
Well, I
that
think
become more
you're
prominent?
missing one part, which is this is Xbox, and this is first party games that are going to be going up in price.
Yeah.
And so, which one of those going up in price are going to be available on Game Pass?
Oh, and that's the other thing. Yeah, that's the other thing.
Yeah,
And that's the thing that the economics don't totally
yeah.
make sense to me.
There will be an uptick probably of Game Pass subscriptions. I don't think it'll be a large margin uh, by any standard, um, but there will be a bump of people being like, I don't want to pay 80, I'll pay, 11 a month, which, after 8 months, they've already paid more, but they do have access through that $88 for the 8 months, a wider margin of games than one game for 80.
Yeah, but um that is assume and I think Game Pass on console is like a little more expensive or whatever. I don't have the
Mm-hmm.
numbers in front of me. But what you're getting with Game Pass is a bunch of different games, right? So
Yeah.
getting access to one specific game. But if you are, because I have seen like multiple things where Game Pass doesn't cut into sales, Game Pass does, and I'm not sure what the truth is. My suspicion is that it is maybe that it used to not as much. Game Pass
Mm-hmm.
used to not cut into sales as much. Now it maybe there's analytics that looks like it kind of does. I don't know. I haven't looked at analytics lately. But if you are pricing a game at $80, um, at what threshold are you going to start steering people more towards Game Pass who maybe
Mm-hmm.
have just Cinewas Hellblade 2. I bought Hellblade 2 on Steam, even though I could have paid $11 or whatever to play it on Game Pass, right? But I was like, no, I'll support the developer, $60, whatever. If you put Hellblade 2 out there for $80, it's like, okay, now I'm paying $80. It's $20 more for a 10-15-ish hour game that is no doubt gorgeous and extremely well crafted, but it's just like
Mm-hmm.
and when I can also pay $11 to play this on Game Pass, that is making it more of a hard sale for me. Hard sell for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not to devalue like a Ninja Theory or Hellblade 2 or narrative driven games or anything like that. It's the same thing with, I don't know, it's the same thing with like big games. Yeah, like if Fable came out and it got good reviews, yeah, I might try it on Game Pass. I don't know. It's the math equations just change, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think it changes for a lot of people. And I don't know what Microsoft is. I'm curious what Microsoft's plan is with that. If Game Pass becomes more expensive, or if Game Pass becomes less of a good service, where maybe there's fewer games or whatever, or maybe if they pay. The way I assume it works is they pay developers so much to have their games, like a contract to have their
Mm-hmm.
game on Game Pass for so long. If those payments start to go down, I don't know. But yeah, there's just a bunch of economic questions that I haven't totally figured out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Microsoft has either. But yeah, the
At
thing
this
is,
point, I think Microsoft has had their accounting department crunch the numbers enough that they have a solid understanding of how this will affect uh, game purchases versus game purchases eating in versus or against Game Pass, and how many people will end up doing both. I think it's been going on long enough. They have enough data and analytics to make accurate guesses and make these kind of moves with some certainty.
yeah. As far as the consoles go, to me, this just seems like the Series X and S have not been super successful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I don't know if I would categorize them as failures. I'm not sure. Again, these are numbers I don't have in front of me, but they haven't been as successful as PlayStation 5. So to
Mm-hmm.
me, this is like really unfortunate because Xbox never got their footing with this generation. It felt like they had a good idea with Game Pass. That obviously getting Bethesda and getting Activision were two big gets, but those happened years into the console's life cycle. By then,
Yeah.
PlayStation 5 had sort of established itself. I think a lot of people, I think PlayStation's single player strength carried it into this generation, right? I think people who were super into single player games, or more casual people who were playing Madden and whatnot, you know, they were on PS4, and so the PS5 was just sort of a natural jump, whereas not as many people played on Xbox One. So it's just, instead of sort of earning some of that market back, people just went to the next PlayStation, as opposed to, you know, as opposed to figuring out what these two different Xboxes were. And also, I never liked the name Series X and Series S. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that was, you know, maybe that had nothing. Maybe market research showed that everybody loved those names, and I'm a weirdo who doesn't like it. I don't know, but I never thought those naming, that the Xbox's whole naming convention has just been confusing.
Xbox 360 One.
And then Series S and Series X.
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, where PlayStation has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, and they're going to have 6. And so it's like Xbox I don't know, maybe Xbox with their next Xbox, simplify that somehow and make it a little
Series S2, Series X2.
There you go. Add numbers and more letters to it. That'll definitely make it better.
But 2 in Roman numerals.
Yes.
Series C.
Yeah. And I don't know how this is going to impact, with these tariffs, I don't know how this is going to impact consoles in the future. Because within the next, it's 2025 right now, so within the next 3 years, you would expect to hear something about the next generation of consoles, right? Unless this new world we're in, who knows what's going to happen, I guess. But you would expect somewhere in there to start, you know, we would start the transition into the next generation, which is crazy because it feels like this generation just started 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because time is flat and the past 5 years have been meaningless. But, you know, how are tariffs going to impact that? Are we just going to see consoles get even more expensive? And if so, are people not going to jump to those consoles then? Are people going to, I don't know. There's a bunch of questions. There's a bunch of speculation. I don't know. But PlayStation, I assume Sony's going to do this as well. They're going to up the price of the PlayStation, and who knows how they're going to charge, what they're going to charge for games. But things are going to get more expensive, and I just feel like the solution to games industry problems is not to just charge $80 for games and tack on $100 on the consoles. I don't know. I feel like I'm not sure if the systemic problems of budgets being inflated and games exponentially getting more and more expensive can be solved by continuously tacking on $10 onto the price of certain games every year or so. Like, eventually, there will be some kind of plateau somewhere where people just aren't going to spend that much on a game, and that's unfortunate, but it's also a reality. So there's got to be a different solution there. And like I said, saying that games need to be more expensive, that's multiple things can be true at once, and that's not necessarily an incorrect thing. But anything else you would like to say about this?
No, I think we've touched it.
Okay, so we've got some bad games journalism news. A couple different stories here. Polygon owner Vox Media sold the site to Valnet, and mass layoffs followed. Valnet has been accused of being a content, I'm not going to say accused. That's kind of what the company is. Content mill that, pays poorly, SEO hounding, that kind of thing, right? Which I think is is pretty accurate. The Vox Media Union said in a statement, quote, "With only a month left until the current union contract expires at Vox Media, the company yesterday announced it sold Polygon and laid off the bargaining unit at the site. Polygon has long been a must-read destination for gaming and geek culture news, and its talented, award-winning journalists were an essential part of what has made Vox Media a profitable and top-tier online media company. It is hard to fathom management's commitment to its workers and its readers when this marks the 5th round of layoffs in just the last 6 months. Vox Media touts its progressive values and its responsibility to build a better media industry by amplifying historically excluded voices. But the only thing clear at the moment is that Vox Media and its CEO, Jim Bankoff, have taken extreme actions to weaken the bargaining unit. The union will not be intimidated by management's short-sighted choice to fire workers, their self-defeating decision to gut Polygon, or their refusal to take these negotiations seriously. Meanwhile, Giant Bomb is pausing live streams while Jeff Grubb says he's no longer working with the company, and creative director Ryan Reichert said he would no longer be appearing on the Giant Bomb cast. In a statement to Kotaku, Giant Bomb owner Fandom said, "As you know, we've temporarily paused Giant Bomb live streaming and that content is currently available on demand for our audience. We understand this programming pause isn't ideal for our audience, but it's part of a strategic reset and realignment of our media brands. We have some creative ideas for the future of Giant Bomb that we're actively working on and we'll be able to communicate more about soon." On a previous podcast of theirs, they apparently made fun of, like, I'm not sure if it was Fandoms or manager somewhere, like, request on handling certain content or advertising. I don't remember what the exact story is, but so we've continuously had this conversation about sort of the state of games journalism. I have a lot to say. I want to do an essay about it one day because my brain's going to explode if I don't just put all the thoughts that I have on a script somewhere and yell them into a camera, so that my wife doesn't have to hear about it anymore. I'm not even sure where to begin. Do you have anything you would like to say about any of this off the top?
This is just bad news for journalism in general, not just games journalism. I think I think any journalism that any ethical journalism that gets reduced like this is just bad for the life of journalism.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Someone at Game Developer pointed out that that apparently this would, if Vox selling Polygon, Vox doesn't have like a dedicated games outlet besides Polygon, so this would mean that a company as big as Vox suddenly is just not going to cover video games, and that's a problem. That's a problem when you have an industry that is so massive, so many people are playing video games. There is so much work to be done discussing video games, reviewing video games, etc., etc. And yet these big outlets, whether it's the Washington Post that's shutting down Launcher, or Vox now getting rid of Polygon, whatever Geo Media wants to do with Kotaku, which is apparently just gut it and treat it the same way. It's like all these giant media conglomerates and media companies and stuff, they don't know what to do with gaming sites, or they don't view it as like relevant or important, and that's really frustrating because games are such a massive business that need people reporting on them and talking about them and stuff like that. And there's clearly demand for it because now every single journalist has a YouTube channel where they have to go and or a Substack because their institutional job is gone. So it's like, Stephen Totilo started at Axios and then Axios stopped. So now Stephen Totilo's at Substack and he's doing really good work. But it's like, one of the problems with this is how atomized everything is getting. And it really stresses me out because, think about, I am subscribed to a sickening amount of Substacks and newsletters, right? It is disgusting. But what else am I supposed to do as someone who wants to read about video games? And sports don't really have this problem, the same atomization does not exist in sports. I can go to ESPN, I can go to The Athletic, I can go to Defector. There's 3 good ones right there. I'm sure there's, The Ringer, there's another one. So it's like there's 4 sites right there that have a host of content, multiple people hired, they do podcasts, they do, analysis, all kinds of stuff, and it's all hosted under various banners, and it's easy to find, right? Whereas video games do not have that sort of tentpole thing where they have a giant institution that holds up, sort of one end of the spectrum, and then you have the independent media doing its own thing. You don't have that, and I think that's a problem. It's a problem because when you're by yourself, you don't have the same security you do as if you work at a massive company. It's a problem because now if you're someone who wants to if you're someone who wants to read a lot about video games and know the business really well, it's like you have to subscribe to all these different newsletters that are going to absolutely demolish your inbox. And you have to decide, who are you going to support financially? Because you can't support everybody. You can't support Stephen Totilo and Bloomberg and Aftermath, and a bunch of people on Patreon. And, you can go on and on. Like if you gave me time, I'm sure I can make a list of 10 or 15 outlets or organizations that you could subscribe to. Games Radar Plus, Eurogamer, I think, has a subscription service. So there's all that stuff. And so it's like, you can't do that because that's way too much money. And of course, you're also going up against normal subscriptions like streaming services, Xbox Game Pass, stuff like that, So it's just that is not a sustainable way to, I think, build an audience that knows video games, right? I don't think that's a sustainable way, and I don't think it's a good way to do it. And also, what it does is it makes it way harder to break in new people. I don't want to sound like I'm making myself the center of discussion here, but it's difficult to break into a business when that business is crumbling above you. And what that means is that new voices are going to get drowned out, new thoughts are going to get drowned out, ideas are going to get drowned out, and entire generations are going to be let go and stuff. And I guess that's been always true with games media, but are we ever going to have and I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy that's like, are we ever going to have an X of games media? Because I think in some ways we kind of do, but it's just the lack of an institutionalized memory has sidelined these people to different websites where you have to go. Chris Plant at Polygon would be one that who had a job at now he's gone from Polygon, but who had a sustainable position at a tentpole company, right? Stephen Totilo and Jason Schreier, when they worked at Kotaku, it's the same kind of way. But it's like video games don't have that same legacy, that same institutional connectedness and memory. We're not going to have, and right now we don't have a Tim Kirkjian, right? Some guy who's been extremely well known for writing about baseball for 25 or 30 years or whatever, or a Buster Olney, or a Max Lowe, right? Who is very famous if you follow the NBA. Bill Barnwell, who writes for ESPN, all these famous writers that cover really specific things and you can go back, you can go back in time to I'm forgetting his first name, but Grantland Rice, right? Who was a very famous sports writer back in the early 20th century, and guys like Mike Lupica in New York. I'm not good at coming up with names, but the point I'm trying to make here is that you've got sort of this legacy that is built up through the years of institutional knowledge and what good writing looks like. And you don't have that with video games. And I think part of the problem is that it's atomized. Everything gets broken to pieces. Every Lego set gets broken to pieces. And then those Legos pieces are now in their own worlds. And they can only be economically sustainable for their one piece. Stephen Totilo can't really, maybe he can hire an editor. I don't know. I don't see his financial statements, but I'm going to assume Stephen Totilo probably isn't making enough where he could rent out a building and hire 10 writers to start covering games. That probably couldn't happen. And even if he could, how many writers are successful enough that they could do that? Probably not many. And that's just not good. That's not good for building institutional knowledge. That's not good for building a readership that is massive, that is understanding, that needs to cover this stuff, that needs to cover video games. Another thing is content mills are not a good way to learn how to write. Content mills and SEO hounding do not teach good skills. They do not teach good writing habits. What they teach is shortcuts. What they teach is quantity over quality. What they teach is getting things out quickly. And I already think even outside of the real SEO hounding areas of journalism, I think people are already expected to write too many articles. I understand there are economic reasons for this, but like if you're even one article a day, I think is too much in some instances. Like, I'm sorry, there's unless you're really writing about whatever you want, then maybe. But even then, I'm not sure if there's enough news where every day you can write something in depth and interesting that's going on in video games, unless you're playing a video game and writing about it or whatever. But I'm not even sure about that. But like with SEO, where you're writing, 5 stories a day or whatever, and you have to figure out how to change certain wording to fit Google's search engine optimization, and that does not teach like good writing skills, good thinking skills. It teaches you to think small because there is no money in thinking big. You can't think about massive stories that take months to make. That's the freedom and independence you get with being an independent content creator. But then you completely lose the economic security. Now, of course, in the content mill case, you don't have the economic security, so none of it matters anyway. But like I'm working on a project right now that I've been working on for a couple months, and if I were writing for the Washington Post, I'd have to do other things. I couldn't just do this because it would cost me money to do these long stories. But it's like when you do those long stories, when you think long term, when you work on complex things, when you think about, you really have to dig in and do interviews and analyze things, that builds your reporting skills, your writing skills, your analysis skills, your knowledge of games history, right? Like, I don't think people realize how much of reporting on something it's good to know about a thing, right? If you wanted to work in sports media, that's great. Like, hey, you want to be a baseball writer or football writer? I'll say football because that's the sport I know better. It's like, hell yeah. Can't wait for you to write about current sports, but you're going to want to learn the history of the NFL as well. You're going to want to know, Jim Plunkett's career as much as you know Patrick Mahomes. You want to be able to talk about Dan Marino and Brett Favre and Johnny Unitas as much as you can talk about Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes and Eli Manning or any of like the modern NFL quarterbacks. So it's like when you're thinking as SEO, which is short, quick, out the window, none of that gets put into practice because everything is short-term gains, optimized for a search engine. You can't think big. You just have to think quick and fast, quick and fast, quick and fast, churn, churn. And that's not a place where good skills, I think, are nurtured. And it wouldn't be as much of a problem. It would still be a problem if there were sites here and there that did that. But this is becoming sort of if not has already become, the main way that it's like so much of online content is created. Even on YouTube, where you have time, right? Fucking H-Bomber guy makes one video a decade, right? So it's like, if you have the time to sort of take your time on things and think big. But what we see is even people independently, they sort of build up this economic machine where they end up having, the example, H-Bomber guy and his plagiarism video talked about it. The example is that Illuminati person, right? Who was making all these videos and was plagiarizing documentaries and stuff. And so it's like, why? Well, because money. But the thing is, when you started your project, you weren't making that much money. And when I say the project, I mean not just the Illuminati channel, but just the content creation in general, right? It's like when the ship launched, you were not flying at this altitude. You had to get to this altitude, and getting to this altitude was not you must do this, right? I don't think so, especially not in every case. So it's like even in places on the internet where you have the independence, where you think you have the audience, where you don't have to churn out content, it's even happening there too. And so yeah, there's no solution here. Everything is terrifying. And what do you think?
I mean, other than what I already said, it's just, yeah, it is a terrifying prospect of how, I guess, atomized is really the best word. Games media is becoming.
Yeah. You know, I like Jeff Gerstmann, obviously. I listen to his podcast fairly regularly. And so it's just like that. Like Jeff Gerstmann is another voice that, you know, if games had a Tim Kirkjian, Jeff Gerstmann's one of them, right? Mm-hmm. But the problem is that, I don't know, his audience is now limited because it's him by himself, and he's posting on YouTube, and he's got a Patreon, and that's great. But like, Jeff Gerstmann has such a wealth of knowledge about video games, and it's like, if there were an ESPN for video games, he would be on the masthead every day, right? He would be required reading. I'm just making one example here. The point being is that someone with that much knowledge and experience, they get put into this atomized zone where their knowledge and experience does not match the sort of audience that they deserve or should have, right? And that's just one example. Steven Totillo, same way. You know, so okay. I apologize for going on that rant, but yeah, and Valnet does not sound like a good company. Man, it does not. None of these companies are a Valnet gamers group, you know. They're all sort of content mill SEO hounds. But man, yeah, none of that sounds good. Okay, so we're at an hour. You know what? We'll save this EA canceling Titanfall. I think we'll save this for next week, because my throat is dry and I'm starting to get a headache. And that's really my own fault. So I think we'll talk about this next week. Connor, is there anything else about anything you would like to say? Do you want to talk about, I don't know, Dostoevsky? Do you want to talk about War and Peace? Like anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
It is something that I forgot to bring up, of something I played. I started playing Chants of Sinar. Okay. I will talk more about that next week. Still working through it.
Awesome. Okay. Patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. YouTube.com/thegamingdiscourse. We'll see you next week. Bye.